All right. It is like past 2 a.m. when I start recording this, and I think we're going to be here for a while, so should probably jump right into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to me trying to make less of a meme and more of a dream occur here. This is going to be a pretty comprehensive overview as to my thoughts and ranking of the Guilty Gear Strive character themes and tracks. I'm a huge fan of Strive. I'm a huge fan, particularly of the music of Strive, and I've been obsessively listening to these songs since they've all come out. And I've developed a pretty nuanced understanding of each piece. I kind of wanted to convey that here alongside my personal preferences regarding them, and just generally have a discussion about these because it's kind of been a running gag that I release a full tier list every single time that a character drops, in the same way that one would when a patch drops for the actual gameplay of these characters. But um, I kind of wanted to actually give a little bit more warranting and arguments regarding why I view some tracks as just superior to others and why I think some of these tracks have some fatal flaws in them. Of course, this is just a reflection of my own opinion. Music is like one of the most subjective things in the world, if not the most subjective things when it comes to taste. As technique oftentimes can be fully thrown out the window and forgotten about as long as it's appealing. See Daniel Johnston, right? See a lot of harsh noise music. Um, with that in mind, I do kind of want to go over some parameters regarding my tastes, and I think that that will help kind of calibrate people as to what I'm about to say. First and foremost, I am a person who really loves musical maximalism. I think the best way to describe that is, I really like driving guitars. I like big riffs. I like big noise in general, a lot of sound. The loudness war, you will not hear any complaints from me about, just in terms of how things are mixed and whatnot. This kind of maximalism, I think, also kind of will continue on into my feelings on lyrics and themes in a song. I kind of want large, big scope things. If there's something that's personally resonant, that can also work, but I think they have to work extra hard on that front for me to really kind of jump in and say that I'm a big fan of it. I will certainly touch upon songs that do that, and I will talk about why it is the case that I deviate from this norm. But typically, what you'll see is some of these bigger songs, quote unquote, are going to stand near the top of my list, and those that are a little bit more narrow in their scope, either be they like lore or character pieces, typically will fall down a little bit. Obviously, if the lyrics are going to be very narrow, but it has like a really good sound, it will jump back up and vice versa. But we'll get to there when we get to there for each of these particulars. I'm already kind of eyeing a few that I think I'm going to be stuck on this point with for a while. Um, Outside of that, I also wanted to note that in terms of actual lore, while I appreciate it and I like to believe I understand at least some amount of Guilty Gear lore, especially the events of Strive and directly prior to Strive and Xrd, um, I can't say I'm a total expert, and I also want to say that usually correspondence with lore doesn't necessarily impact my enjoyment of the music. The lore is a in the characterization of each of these people is a good representation and I think setting of what the songs are about. But I'm not going to complain that like Jacko's theme is mostly just about her enjoying the small things in life, although that may then lead back to my maximalism point. Rather, I'm not going to say, oh, but there's so much about her relationship with Arya internally that should have been talked about in the song, right? I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to complain about the fact that we're also seeing the same kind of deal with Testament's theme, in terms of it just being very narrow in scope, but also it not necessarily reflecting where they are in the lore. Outside of that, I think that each thought that I have is going to be more individualized. And so if I have to establish deeper standards as I work through this, as this is very clearly unscripted, I will. But as it currently stands, I think we should just jump into it. And what's fortunate for us is by going in this pseudo release order where we also have, this specific setting of characters that shipped with the game where you get this like, I don't know, not order of complexity, but kind of order of weirdness and addition to the game. Um, we begin with Still Bad Guy, who is main character and gets a very main character-ish theme. I'm dropping it in B tier, and this is because it really very much works as kind of a gatekeeper song. Songs that have clear deficiencies are put below it. Songs that are outstanding in some way go above it. And the reason why Soul's theme sits right here in the middle is because it is a very direct rocker with a little bit of attitude to it, especially in its lyrics. But outside of that, it isn't particularly large in scope. It isn't particularly anthemic in a way that I find really resonant. It kind of states his motivations. It has a pretty driving guitar theme that doesn't really evolve throughout much of the track. And while it is enjoyable, I can't really say it does anything special. Therefore, I think B is where it will stay. I will come back and touch upon tracks that go directly above or below it and see how they stack against one another in kind of a comparative. So we'll get a little bit more in terms of elaboration on each individual song as we move down the list. But as it currently stands, I think that I've said enough to just put it in B and we'll keep it there. I can easily see it jumping up or down the tier list for people just depending on how much they like this style of music. Obviously, if you don't like Soul's theme just by virtue of it being a rock song, you're probably going to hate the vast majority of the soundtrack. But even as far as like rock goes, it is very middle of the road. Kind of call it like biker rock in a way. It's very much hung up on, I would say like 1980s American ideals of individualism, freedom of expression, et cetera, which, are valuable and good things. But at the same time, it is done in such an abrasive way that I can't necessarily say, yeah, Soul's theme really speaks to my heart and speaks to the things that I value most in life. Um, and because it is like relatively problem free and doesn't get into kind of internal struggles, it doesn't feel like there's an arc to the song that I'm super tied to. I know that there's like allusions to it lyrically regarding kind of his feelings of loneliness. He talks about how even like when he's on the road, he's never alone, mostly because of Jacko over here and Arya inside of Jacko. Still not exactly sure what the situation is on that front, but regardless, wife guy's got his wife back, and therefore, he's at a point where I can see why he's just talking about these more minute things compared to what some of these other tracks get into. But this is all to say, scope isn't big. The song is fun, but not necessarily compelling in any way. We really don't get like some of the crazy like ending verses that you get on like say Sato's theme, and I know those would be meme to death, but we'll talk about them when we get there. Regardless, B is where this will stand because it certainly is not offensive, but it isn't great. However, what is great is, oddly enough, going to come from one of the characters that I would say is also very standard for a fighting game character, the Shoto of the game. The person who, if his playstyle were food, it would be cardboard. It's Kai Kisk. He's getting an S tier song right off the bat, though. And not only is it an S tier song, this is probably front runner for best song in the game, in my opinion. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that it is both slightly larger in scope than Soul's theme, with a little bit more conflict, and therefore the lyrical resolution and payoff is a little bit more gratifying. But beyond that, it just has a banger sound quality to it. The best way I would describe it is it's hyper anthemic in that basically any point in the song for any other track could work as just like the chorus, the refrain, the thing that it's built around, but it just continues to layer and layer upon itself until you have this really kind of over the top chorus and payoff for a lot of the themes of the song, both sonically alongside its lyrics. The way that I describe some of my favorite tracks, not only within Guilty Gear but as a whole, is that they are songs that hit every single note at every point in time perfectly. It isn't necessarily like you could predict everything that is happening and therefore you're bored, but rather it feels the same way you feel while you're like full comboing in a game like Guitar Hero or Osu. It's just you are in time with the music, yet you are not super expectant of anything, nor are you feeling ungratified by the things that are being directed your way. I think that like one of the core parts of the song that really responds and demonstrates this is going to be the chorus. I have it pulled up. Shout out to Cloud Drop, by the way, just doing these really great spliced together videos of the song, the lyrics, and some fun gameplay in the background. I have the song jumped to the first chorus, and I just kind of want to demonstrate what I mean by having a quick listen to it. What do I have to be? Under the sacred wires, never stop, just go. I don't care how many more gotta get. Here in the pale fire, I'm going out for eyes that can. I hope my path will be a guideline for someone to follow. The roar of this fire. So for me, what I find really fulfilling about this song is the fact that you get that very kind of like driving guitar and synth passage. There's this like very sparkly kind of shiny synth at the very top end of the chorus while he's singing. Um, and all that comes together to kind of lead you on to the next beat really, really heavily. And it never comes off as overbearing, though. You are along for the ride. You're hanging on to every word. And some of that also comes down to the lack of clarity that comes from Naoki's vocals being a native Japanese speaker. The Under the Sacred Briars, I think a lot of people read as Under the Sacred Fire when it first came out. And then obviously you have the double rhyme with Bearing the Pale Fire, which some people were not a fan of. But when we now know it's like Under the Sacred Briars, I think that you are very involved in the scene setting that the song is bringing to the table with its lyrics, and then it pivots to this kind of manifesto for Kai in much the same way that Find Your One Way is a manifesto for Soul Bad Guy, right? The reason why I think that the lyrics work a little bit better, and the reason why I say that it's of broader scope than Soul, is that rather than being kind of a statement on a singular value that Soul has, that being, don't fuck with me, and I won't fuck with you, and that's chill, and that's how the world should be. The thing with Kai's theme is that it's much more a statement not only about internal conflict and how he's forcing himself to overcome it, but it's very much kind of enumerating his willpower that is kind of contingent upon him overcoming those hardships. And this is something that is more broadly applicable, right? Like I could think about like the lines like I don't care how many more scars I get, and I can apply that to myself and apply that to my own means of development. The thing with Soul is that because it's a statement on a few specific issues and ideals that he has, it doesn't come off as valuable to me, or as applicable. And therefore, I think, and I say the scope is smaller for Soul Song. And I think this works to the benefit of Kai's theme as a whole. And therefore, it sits in S tier as it currently stands. In terms of drawbacks for the track, I always found that its guitar solo was not necessarily grating, but it goes on for a little bit too long. And part of the reason behind that is that it's the only real point in the song where the lyrics really fall away, and then you are left to stew with the very driving beat that has been motivating the song up until this point. And this is the only part where I think there's like a little bit of lag time where I say that feeling of full comboing kind of falls out, and you are kind of left knowing what's coming next and not necessarily being a big fan of it. I will give an example by jumping over to it really quick. So for me, there's a few issues with the way that this solo is run. The first is that you have this kind of like more noodly part where the lead guitar is, pretty high up on the fretboard, and they are playing alongside this very, very prominent drum track. And that drum track is what is motivating along the song. But you also aren't necessarily getting the same depth that you get when you have Naoki's vocals on top of it, and then below that or above that, you could even say you have those sparkling synths, you have another guitar track going. It just kind of feels like it isn't necessarily in line with the momentum of the song. And then you kind of cut to the secondary phase where then we see a return to the main riff, and it is unornamented by singing. It is much more clear in the mix because that's the case. And it goes on for quite a while before then pivoting back to the beat necessary to dive into the next verse. And those three levels back to back to back are not necessarily unexpected. They don't really change much up. I don't really feel the evolution there. And I would say that this is my one complaint with what is otherwise a stellar track. And honestly, this does not take away from my enjoyment enough to at all bump this song down. I think just broadly, it is one of the most gratifying songs to just straight up listen to. And therefore, I really wouldn't touch a whole lot about it because I also do think it needs a solo. I just can't envision what a good solo sounds like for it because I lack musical talent. Regardless, we are going to move on to the next player, and that is going to be May. Now, this is going to be the first time where I think I really have to directly reference and go against my standard in regards to scope. May's song is very much like an I want song, and particularly she wants a sexy Johnny. Um, and she very much just sings about that. It is a song very much caught up in a very singular kind of almost unrequited love. Um, and for me, it still makes the song great. And I'm willing to forgive both its lack of maximalism when it comes to the lyrics and when it comes to the overall attitude involved, because the song, for what it is in terms of a romance theme, it being so maximalist when it comes to its tune and to its sound. I'm gonna put it into A tier. A tier certainly is not bad. It has many outstanding features to it, and I know people are annoyed by it, but I think that it bangs. And we're gonna be seeing me talk a lot more about May in regards to some of these other, especially female-fronted tracks, in terms of the singing, because we get kind of a similar like "I Want" theme for Jacko as well as for Bridget. But right now, the gold standard is going to be Disaster of Passion. That is currently sitting in A tier. Um, Similar to Kai, I want to jump to the chorus of the song because I think that it's kind of the same notes that give me such renown for Kai's theme, that being the feeling of you just full comboing a song in Guitar Hero. You know what's coming next, but you're along for the ride. In particular, I like the sustained notes of like Off Season Swallow, and there's still being like a lot of individual beats to the music under it. So let's see. And so you can kind of see that you have those three very fulfilling sustain notes, the swallow, follow, and then you. And then you get a really, really nice contrast that I think completely answers the question being set up by those sustained notes with the statement of the song's title, the "I'm the disaster of passion," which is kind of not staccato, but every single syllable is very clearly enunciated in a way to correspond with the beat. And then we are right back on the ride. You're kind of gliding over the first part of the chorus, and then you're hitting every single note of the second part of the chorus. So then you could transition to the verse that, is staying much more in the lines in regards to how it's delivered. So I love that. I think that that's a really good feature. And once again, it's just kind of a blast of happiness. The very high little keyboard notes kind of also is what brings Kai's theme up quite a notch. And once again, that maximalism is paying off quite nicely. I think that actually did a little bit of dead zone at the very start of the track. The guitar strum really kind of shows how much of a wall of sound the track is by comparison. And that just kind of furthers that maximalist point I was making. And it gives you a real appreciation for just how many levels are between the keyboard line, the bass, the guitar. It all comes together really well. And I know people hate on this theme. I'm certainly not going to be one of them. What I will hate on is our next contender, which is Axel Lowe. And it is unfortunate that he is going to be our first D tier song. There's a lot of silly stuff about this one. I think that we have memed the like whole walking by a cafe, there's like a smell of coffee and a dog bow wow. I forgot the exact way it goes, but that's mostly because the song's probably pretty forgettable. Um, it feels like it's going for an anthemic statement in the way that these other tracks are on our list, but I think it's the first one that really fails in doing so. When you think about the driving tone behind, say, May's theme, you're thinking off season swallow. I know I can't sing. And then for Kai, it's the under the sacred briars. For Axel, there's like a few different things. Part of it is like the out of the box, and there's another part that's the whoa whoa, and even then I can't remember the exact ways the woes goes, but it demonstrates that they're like trying to like stick together a bunch of stuff, and then all of this doesn't correspond at all with the verses that are almost kind of this like scene talking, almost like cake like exploration of like various like disparate thoughts about how he like lives out of time, which I think is like a cool idea. And I understand it's corresponding with his lore, blah blah blah. And I really like what they're trying to do with the payoff, the unfreezing of time that comes in that bridge. But once again, it's just way too many random parts mixed together and it doesn't pay off. I'm going to play the bridge that I talked about, which I do think is the peak of the song, as kind of a demonstration of this fact. And then it goes into that heavy riffing section where Naoki's showing off. You have the woes going once again. And like I said, I like the payoff, especially because we have the My Frozen Time is Frozen Still or something along those lines earlier on in the track. Um, for me, the problem is also it comes right after another very noodly guitar passage that to me doesn't actually like stick with the beat of the song, which is already disparate enough as it is. But that's a discussion for another exceptionally long video. Um, zooming in back in on specifically that part of the track, you have the whole kind of like sweeping layers of vocals in chorus, but you also have this like weird, it's dramatic about that part, that tries to do the same kind of thing that the end of May's chorus does, where you're riding along the beat a lot more closely before then opening up, as a reverse of what we actually see in Disaster of Passion, where you are riding the thing very loosely and then you zoom in right at the very end to bring us back to the to the verses that come next. Um, here, I don't really think it works. Also, it's because the lyrics are silly. I understand that you get different mileage out of the lyrics here, and I know that a lot of people just aren't a fan of the English in general, but I think it's particularly harmful to the song's resonance on this track. And there's actually plenty of other songs where I think that the way that the English is written actually like works to its benefit, but we'll get there when we get there, and I will gush about it. Here it just kind of feels like he's too laid back for me to really be involved in his story. I don't get the same kind of pathos that I do out of, say, Kai's theme, where he's clearly overcoming something, but how he overcomes it is broadly not mentioned. Maybe it has something to do with like appreciating the smaller things of life, but then we're zooming that scope in, and it doesn't really work in the same way that May's theme works. I do think that, it's something that's like a little bit more applicable than, Soul, in terms of your time is freed back up. You could see that as like broadly the ability to move about and do things, a freedom to be yourself. But it takes a few more mental stretches than I would like to see for me to say that this is a song that I'm a big fan of. And like I said, it's so discordant in other ways that I'm not going to listen to it for just its raw musicality. Therefore, it is unfortunately in that D tier. Moving forward, we got Chip, and we are currently in a run where I am just not a fan of these songs, and they are going to be placed low. This is also going in D tier. It is going above Axel, though. They kind of are brothers in a way. Not only are they side by side at the beginning of this tier list, but they are side by side on the tier list itself. But thematically, I think that they also have similar grievances. The thing with Chip's theme is that it too is exceptionally silly. The whole fight like a tiger, and then I know it's walk in the pyre, but everybody thinks it's walk in the park. Um, I don't know. It just feels very difficult to like access his struggles. And I think that also part of this comes from the fact that it's going for like the rude dude attitude that Soul has, and therefore I can't really access his lowest points very well either. Obviously, Chip's background is one that could beget a lot of struggles and have those represented here, and I do think that they are like broadly alluded to in the first verse, but I'm not personally a big fan of it. I also don't think that the bridge really pays off. The whole "you'll get wiped out" part feels very forced. I think it's one of the few times where Naoki is not even necessarily getting out of his range, but he's getting out of his like favored tonality, and I don't think it pays off. We're gonna listen to the chorus just to kind of get of a sense of why I think the silliness removes me from the track, but we're gonna move pretty quickly past this one.
Go that way that you want, that's how it is. No matter what life flow that you take it on. Well, fight like a tiger, walk in the park, play the hero till I die. Fly like an eagle, soar through the sky, be free till you die.
So for me, while I do like this is another kind of triumphing over hardship song, it just doesn't really work quite as well as the very poetic articulation that we get out of Kai's theme. The no matter how many scars I get, pushing forward, bearing the pale fire, I'm kind of showing the light within. Here we're getting fight like a tiger, and we're getting, fly like an eagle, soar through the sky. Neither of these similes are things you can realistically access in your life. And I just think that overall it just comes off as like a little bit juvenile. And I think this is further driven home by like the fast tempo that they try to create. It just doesn't really come together to me as like a very enjoyable experience song wise. And sonically, once again, I think that it goes a bit too hard towards like this kind of weird like punk rock thing, but it doesn't have that kind of like that rough edge that punk often has, which comes from like a more lo-fi production standard here, because everything is being done in the studio. Daisuke, I'm sure, is getting the best of the best sound engineers to work on every single song, although that does mean that you have relatively like uniform kind of production values. It just doesn't pay off super well for this, and there's a lot going on. And while I do think some people get more into the beat that comes from the chorus and from the verses, to me, it doesn't really get there. I personally am not feeling the drive in the way that I do for some of these other more preferred tracks. Luckily, we will lighten up a little bit here as we have Potemkin. Potemkin is someone who has vacillated between the very top of A tier and the very bottom of S tier for a while, but feeling charitable at this point in time and really enjoying some aspects of it, I'm going to drop it here. Potemkin's song is very interesting because obviously I am not a genetically engineered super soldier that is like 8 feet tall and can half health a chip for little to no effort. I am someone who does not necessarily believe themselves to be like a pawn of like a great terroristic superpower, but that is what a lot of Pot's theme is about. And the thing is, when it gets to this kind of more exacting statements about like the government and whatnot, it's occurring during what I think are like the low points of the songs, which are broadly the verses, which are once again done in this kind of like a scene speak. This time it's being filtered through what sounds like a loudspeaker, I think, to kind of represent that not even proletarian, but broadly like propagandistic kind of tone that they're trying to set around Zepp. And to me, that doesn't really work super well. The thing is, at the same time, it doesn't overstay its welcome when it comes to the song duration. Just in general, it's like one of the shorter tracks on here that I put really high up. And it is fulfilled by just some beautiful choruses. I think that basically everybody loves the society refrain. And to me, it's not even the peak of the song. And I think that the ending of it is one of the best in the entire game, because we get a return and an elaboration upon some of the despair that Pot has. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a lyrical turn that sweeps the issues that Pot has under the rug. I'll play it here in a second, and we can go back and talk about why it is the case that I think it stands head and shoulders above a lot of these other songs trying to do the same kind of payoff. And this will be my warrant for why it's in S tier.
Society
chills. There's several things that concluding part of the song do really well to fix some of the grievances that I have prior. For one, it doesn't return back to that loudspeakery verse kind of delivery that we're getting out of Naoki earlier in the song, and therefore it doesn't taint my mind when the song comes to what is a surprisingly abrupt and I think really touching end. Um, After that guitar solo, that also I must note is shorter and once again doesn't overstay its welcome, but furthermore, it also stays on beat a little bit more. And I know that from a musical perspective, all these solos for the most part are staying on beat. But what I mean by that is that it's more representative of what the momentum of the song should be like. And it does so without becoming super predictable in the way that the latter part of Kai's solo does. Yet still, it does sit under Kai. In comparison, we'll touch upon that in a few seconds. But I really want to quickly just talk about Pot's theme on its own praises and benefits right now. The other thing to note regarding the song is that up until this point, we are getting a very kind of despairing message. And while that is not necessarily lessened, the sudden paradigm shift to him still being relatively affirmed in his value and his life, while also not necessarily shoving away all the problems that he has, comes and it goes without giving you the time to fully process it. And therefore, you're really sitting there thinking about the song far after it ends. And that is not something you get out of a lot of music. And I'm not saying that from like a boomer perspective of, music these days is worse. I'm saying that broadly, a lot of music doesn't really try to go for that. And for as odd as it is articulated, it's a banger, and I think it works really, really well. The reason why it goes under Kai's theme is that while I do have grievances regarding Kai's guitar solo, the guitar solo comes once and eventually it goes away, and we get a big payoff again on his song. But the verses are a lot better, and I think that the chorus also peaks slightly higher than the society refrain. A lot of Pot's theme is therefore back ended at that very last concluding section, and that's the reason why I put it in S tier, but it does stay below Kai comparatively. Now we move on to Laust, and poor Faust, he isn't high tier in game, and he certainly is not high tier in music. I think he has the single worst theme. Yet again, this is a matter of me just not really getting what the song's going for, and it being too much of a mess for me to really ride along with its more resounding aspects. I don't think the song is completely irredeemable. I don't think there's any really horrible tracks throughout the entirety of the Thrive soundtrack, but Faust certainly is the closest to it. And that's just because there's several segments of the song that just do not work at all for me. The lyrics vaguely pretty silly. The A B C D E F go is a good example of something that is just insubstantial, doesn't say anything, nor is it particularly interesting. I also think that out of all the songs that have those kind of sonic changes to correspond with a big payoff, it is the worst in how they do it, because they transition to a pretty slow section, but for me, that slow section, which we will play here in a second, is just really, really disrespectful to the momentum that the rest of the song is trying to build up. Not necessarily that it does a super good job of that, even as I find broadly the whole really accelerated like lines in between the alone infection being screamed alongside random words like chaos and etc etc. But I just don't think that like this it earns this payoff.
Before the storm hit, with your toy, with your toy, I told me without you.
of goes on, and there's also a little bit more of that preceding, very plotting section that I am going to skip over, and I do not particularly want to hear ever again. Um, oops, we're gonna hop back here. Uh, it's I see what it's trying to go for, and I think that like it's very musically competent. I like the kind of sweeping synths, but you could kind of tell that they were in the studio after the first rendition of going back to the chorus, the "We've got only one sky, blue, red, and black paranoia" part, and they're like, "Ah, crap! It's not paying off hard enough, guys. Someone go in the studio and go read paranoia in that kind of voice that we use for the entirety of Potemkin's verse, and let's have like another layered track under that one, and maybe that's going to be enough of a payoff," and it just doesn't work for me at all. And like I said, I think there's a section before that, it's kind of directionless. The transition doesn't really feel supernatural as it jumps into the "without you" part either. And so as a whole, that is just one of several also kind of not even genre switches but beat switches we get throughout the song, and all of them are about as discordant as what we just heard there. So with that in mind, we're sitting at the very bottom. I'm touching upon its exact flaws a little bit more than I hope to do for a lot of these tracks, because this is overall supposed to be a celebration of Guilty Gear music. But I have to justify why this is the very, very bottom and everything's up from here. All right, well, speaking of up from here, we have Amelia Rage's theme, who originally occupied pretty high S tier, but has slipped in the ranks for me. I would now say that it is the gatekeeper of S, sitting at the very top of A tier. Or I guess therefore it's the... No, I guess it is theoretically still the gatekeeper of S, although that typically implies that you're a part of the thing you're gatekeeping. I don't know. Maybe it's like one of those white knights on Twitter that just kind of takes up the banner of someone that doesn't know who they are. Regardless, the Amelia Rage theme is interesting because there's a lot of parts that are great, but I don't think that they bear the benefit of repeat listenings that some of these other songs do. If you enjoy the "So Carry On, Love the Subhuman Self" part, then you are going to very much enjoy the song, but that's about all that it offers. There's also some little silly sonic change ups and alterations they make between verse 1 and 2 that I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of the shouted random colloquialisms deal. The whole like the bee's knees part, I think, is like the biggest offender on that front. Overall, though, the lyrics are pretty good, as long as you take away some of that nonsense. I think that the chorus itself is actually one of the very smartest turns of phrases in the entire game, and therefore it does get high marks, and it's going to stay consistently above many other tracks because of that. The idea of loving the subhuman self, when you unpack it, is about loving kind of your darkest parts and trying to see yourself as a complete human being, flaws and all, which, while you may work to adjust, may always be like caught in a constant process and loop of development. That's resounding. I think that's valuable. I like that turn of phrase. That being said, I don't think that the verses have many more of those moments in the way that some of the better songs do. I do like the "break yourself inside out," but even that is then followed up by like some like kind of metaphors that don't go anywhere. Like, even if I smash the mirror, how do we look not cute? And I also don't really like the "Oh lullaby, don't stop until I fall in flames" part. I don't think that is particularly well written. It's kind of angsty without kind of the artful payoff that you get from some of the other tracks. But yeah, those things don't necessarily cut against how good it is overall in terms of riding along this maximalist kind of anthemic swing that we get during the chorus. That is, I think, very correspondent with what we get out of Kai's theme and whatnot. And it also doesn't cut against what I think is my favorite part of the whole track. I literally commented on Cloudrop's video about it, so we're going to use that to jump to the timestamp. We are going to jump back a few seconds to get the full payoff, and that is this kind of harmonized section where we refrain inside of the chorus the "love the subhuman self" part, and it's like an octave up, and man, it bangs hard. And kind of similarly to Pot's theme, the song also skedaddles on out right after that, which is a huge virtue in my opinion. Um, for me, I think that just kind of shows how robust the inherent idea of the song is, the loving yourself completely part. Um, and I think it also shows how strong that turn of phrase is, that they're able to return to it as the payoff for the song. And they just, have Aisha go up a few octaves and boom, you have a really hard hitter on your hands. Um, there's nothing super special in regards to evolution to make me put this in S tier, but I think that A is still a great place to be. And I think that it is praiseworthy that Milia gets such a good payoff for when this character has kind of been mistreated throughout the entirety of the franchise. All right. Speaking of getting mistreated, there is no man more emo and shit on than Zato 1 in Guilty Gear Strive. I guess Faust also got the shaft, but, unfortunately, he did not have the theme that really reflected that as well. Zato is another S tier. It's going to go above Potemkin, but below Kai. And I think that this is like, hello, tier maker. Oh, there we go. I think that it is something that most people can agree upon. A lot of people say it's the best theme in the game. Um, I am also still going to act as a Zato 1 theme apologist for those people who really look down on it for whatever reason. I think they just don't like when things are popular, or maybe they just don't get what's happening prior to the ending payoff. But here's what I'll say: people overemphasize the value of its last verse. The song as a whole bangs, and if you don't like the Vanish into Dark part of the song, we cannot be friends. We are going to go listen to that, and we are going to actually jump into the first minute and a half or so before I get back to talking to you.
Vanish into dark. Future now and past. Vanish into dark. Waiting all mixes up. Drowning in pain, I lost my mind.
So the reason why I let that go on for a while is because I also wanted to hit on that intro verse that I think a lot of people underappreciate. The fact that we are getting a intro to the main tempo and time signature of the majority of the song, and then layered very lightly on top of that is this kind of discordant piano hitting alongside this verse that is delivered very, very differently than what we get out of this first chorus. Kind of leads to this feeling that there's this like part of this puzzle that has not been completed, and I think it's that the payoff is so sweet in that last minute 20 seconds or so, because that part exists, and you are not necessarily left hanging on that, because then you have a very strong driving force that then gets you to focus on the song as it currently happens. But it will return to your mind once we hear a repeating of some of the lyrics that we saw at the very beginning. But the Vanish into Dark part is so good, man. You get this really kind of high, like guitar wailing, on top of everything else that's happening, that keeps the TikTok ADHD addled part of your brain really entertained, as everything else happens below it. And I think just in general, it's another theme that also benefits from being generalized enough, but also expressing enough in terms of the darker parts of human experience, that I find its lyrics very universalizable and very enjoyable. The idea of kind of being in a state of anomie, you're experiencing a lack of feeling one way or the other, the inability to really move beyond this like state of darkness you're in is fun, as you could tell. The lighting in my room and the black shirt is kind of demonstrating the extent to which I'm surrounded by darkness. But the fact that you're in this state where it feels like there's nothing that's relatedly like affirming your values and whatnot, and you have to push back against that is really good. And then everything zooms right back in. There's a directed thing that's allowing Zato to kind of grip on that rope and pull himself up, and hopefully we all can find those things in our lives, right? The fact that his thing is particularly Milia Rage is obviously not something that's super universalizable unless you're like really into waifuism, but I think that it is a transplantable feeling, and the fact that it is another person but not necessarily explicitly Milia through the lyrics means that you can kind of graft this onto your own experiences, and I think that there's value in doing so. Obviously everybody talks about the small little bit of harmonization at the end between Aisha and Zato, or Naoki is playing Zato as Aisha plays Milia, given the fact that Love the Subhuman Self is sung by her. That's really cute. I really like that. I actually don't think it's like that sonically noticeable, but people keep pointing it out, so I thought I'd do the same here. But overall, I know some people also find that the Drown in Pain, I Lose My Mind, there's no good or bad in there. That kind of part of the song is a little bit discordant, but for me, it does what the end of May's chorus does, where it zooms back in, and the syllables of the song are directly correspondent with the beats that are coming alongside it, and therefore I can kind of ride that wave, bounce up and down to it, and then we get back to the Vanish into Dark, which rides a really high above the rest of the track, and it's sublime. It is clearly deserving of S. I do think that it doesn't peak quite as high as Kai's theme does, though. Obviously, it evolves a little bit more in terms of setting up the whole last minute 20 seconds that everybody talks about, and it's super fabled, and I love a lot of parts about it. But I do think that it is overall less poetic than Kai, although there are a few moments that really touch me. I love the "if there's a man who can make anything, give me the tools to live in the past." That's a really good one. But outside of that, we don't really get the return to like the Bearing the Pale Fire. I'll go as far as I can. Those things that exist in Kai's theme and are very clearly redoubled upon every time that we experience the chorus. Alrighty. We are going to now hop forward to one of the most underappreciated tracks in the game, if not the single most underappreciated. Also, where'd the Zato? Okay, Zato is there. He just kind of blends in, man. The dark background and latex. Ram is going above Potemkin in S tier. It is going below Zato and Kai, but oh my god, this theme is so good. I think that for me, the reason why it took a long time for me to get to the point to where I'm putting it S tier is because, as someone who very clearly is invested in the beat of a song and getting really deep into that, it being kind of in a weird time signature makes it a little bit difficult to access, I think, the tempo that it wants to go for. But once you get there, it's beautiful. And honestly, it is one of the songs where it has some of those like kind of like cute lore referential things that actually like really pay off and make me enjoy the track more. So this is a deviation away from my standard. I love the fact that part of the song, particularly in the beginning, is done in, I believe, Esperanto, which is a constructed language to kind of deal with the fact that Ram is a Valentine and an artificial life form that struggles with human emotions. Therefore, you also see correspondence with Zato's theme, which I think also is about a lack of a feeling that he's experienced ever since the weird resurrection thing. He was like controlled by Eddie before. I don't know, man. Guilty Gear lore is weird. But this track, I think, does a great job of bringing together a bunch of disparate elements into like a really fulfilling whole. And for me, it also has a very understated bridge that really helps in driving home just how good the song is. I'm going to play that for everybody because I think that people just gloss over this track after hearing the first few minutes as you would while just playing the game, and they don't actually get to this part, or they don't think about this part hard enough in isolation from the experience of just getting slammed into the wall over and over again because the ramble with all corner pressure is still nutty. We are going to jump over to that. I mean, what a fucking payoff, man. It's a turn of a lot of what we heard earlier in the song. We're going to return to the proper chorus itself right after this, with the "If a room without a sky is what we idolize as the dead tomorrow." And while that's also a very cute turn of phrase, the whole oh man, I just get chills listening to it. But let me see if I can pull it up through here. But the whole black and white two are one necessary discrepancy. The loving foolish world is just fine, which is a turn from the loving foolish world is still going on, or the loving foolish world is down there. Uh, Showing Ramlethal's struggle and subsequent triumph over her aggressive feelings towards the world that were kind of forced upon her as a Valentine and a representative of the backyard. I think, I don't know, man. It works so well because it comes right after the reason why she would change. She hears this voice of life, this little voice, right? This ability to confront the thing that she was told to fight, and then she actually understands the what the bounty of the world has to offer. A burger, I think, is the current meme. It's so good, man. It's so good, and maybe it just hits me harder than most, but I genuinely think that this is one of the best themes in the game, solely by virtue of it evolving so well without necessarily having to do the whole Faust thing of switching its elements around so dramatically that you are pulled out of the beat and the soundscape it creates. Oh man. Yeah, it's S tier. I really recommend you guys go back and listen to this if you rate Ram's theme lowly. I know many people do. It certainly deserves a second look, and there's a reason why Daisuke names the album compilations a necessary discrepancy, right? Because he does view the song as like an embodiment of the series, and I think that thematically it pulls that off with flying colors. The Esperanto part at the beginning I also said was great, and also to note, we get more of that fantastic Naoki Aisha harmonization there at the very end of the bridge. That's also sick as hell. I mean, everything just works so well, and I kind of wish I was like a little bit more restrained and able to more eloquently state why I love this song, but it really is one of the ones where like it pulls deep and kind of like just tingles my heart in a much more intangible way than I can really make words out of, because that's the journey and value of music to a degree. All right, not to overstate our welcome on that song, we're going to jump and actually move and finally fill out every single letter on the bracket and give Leo a C tier. It is high C tier, but C tier nonetheless. I know some people are going to be mad about me for this, and this is coming right after I tried to beg you guys to critically reevaluate Ram's theme, so, come at me if you want. But as much as I like the idea behind Leo's themes, there are a few sections of it that, once again, it's not even that they're silly. I think making fun of PTSD and calling the way that it's rendered here silly is probably bad, but it just doesn't work. I think part of it comes down to the fact that Naoki's pronunciation of bastards is always going to be funny to me. But yeah, there's a lot of like insubstantial parts of the chorus that are reliant upon the ideas conveyed before, and I don't think that they are. I will play the kind of transition into the chorus, the kind of like chanted aspect of it, and then we will hear the chorus itself, and I'll give an explanation of what I mean.
Who can save lives? People are all dead, but so are the monsters. I woke up one morning, strangers say hello to me. Tomorrow they names will be carved on the stone. We're going home, but I'm a terrible liar. Forgive me, that's not the art of for the sake of the day, keep crying out. Swing the soul, swing the soul, swing the freaking soul down. Hellfire, hellfire, bring your buster. Hellfire, 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 hellfire. All the men are going down with us.
So for me, there's several issues. One is, while as thematically potent as this idea of Leo feeling guilty about the fact that he's leading these men to his deaths is really salient in that kind of transitional moment that I wake up one morning and these strangers say hello to me. And I actually really like that, even though it is a dramatic change away from the tempo and pace of the song prior to it. Um, what comes after is a chorus that consists of nothing but hellfire, hellfire, and bring it on, bastards. And it's just like, why are we pivoting the focus of the song back outwards towards Leo's enemies, who, yes, are clearly an obstacle that kill his men, but the whole song is not about that, right? The song is about how he himself fights selflessly because he feels guilty about what he's doing to his men. I don't like the idea of the chorus back as a rallying cry, that all of them are going down with us. It just doesn't work super well to me. It just feels like it's a chorus for a different type of fight song entirely. And therefore, because it's not really super substantial either, right? We aren't getting really artful descriptions of much of anything because he's kind of yelling hellfire, hellfire, bring it on, bastards. It goes in C tier. Not terrible, but these are drawbacks that I think bring it below the kind of gatekeepery nature of Soul Song as just kind of being a straight up manifesto on what they believe. Yes, sonically, I think there are deficiencies, and I think there's deficiencies in songwriting that I think relegate Leo to C tier. That being said, they are above Chip and Axel and Faust because broadly it works, and I like some segments of the song. Like I said, I really enjoy that kind of bridges thing that we get before the chorus proper starts. Um, Moving on to another pretty good track, we're gonna head over to Nago. Nagori Yuki is interesting because there's a lot that works with the song, but I don't come back to it nearly as much as I do a lot of them. I'm putting it high B tier, and I think that there's a few reasons why I come to this conclusion. It outstrips Soul's theme because it is more memorable. It is just, like I said, less desirous that I hear the song. I think it's because its chorus, kind of like Leo's, is insubstantial. Um, I really like the kind of rap element that I'm gonna play for you guys. But the actual chorus itself doesn't really do anything for me. So let's do that transition actually. Where is the rap part? It's somewhere around here. All right.
Welcome to GN Nightly News. DIO distributing AI models for use in the commercial market nationwide. Excitement is sky high over how this magic device highly acclaimed in the medical field and construction industries that we need to live and breathe will alleviate our crisis and reshape what our daily life is. The dual carriage is forever. It's what do you fight for? The world is starting to reject you now. It's time to feast. Bring it out, keep grinding, diving deep like holy steel. I won't face my doom, sayonara. Well done, how dare you? Never too late to bend the knee. When hell freezes over, sayonara.
And so we kind of see the highs and lows of the songs right there. I also really like the build up to the chorus. I really want to note that when I'm saying I don't like the chorus, I really love the part where it's time to feast, and you get this drop away of the whole track. That bangs so hard. The thing is, the actual chorus itself, while it does have kind of that fight song spirit thing that we're getting out of Kai's and we're getting out of a lot of these other tracks, it's another one that just doesn't say a whole lot. I kind of like the dive in like cold steel line, the dive in deep like cold steel line. It's certainly an image that I think really works with how gritty the song is, but then you kind of do this like when hell freezes over, blah blah blah, and I just get lost at that point. It's too tiring to hear the like kind of redoubling of these statements. And I also don't like the "well done, how dare you" thing. I understand he's like talking to an enemy or something. It's just we aren't getting addressed to that person for the vast majority of the track, and then it kind of like whiplashes us thematically into that. Not as good of a deal as what we get otherwise, which is a song that very much coasts and knows the ins and outs of its beat really well. That's why the rap section works. It skips across the beat like stones on water. It's so nice. I think that it's very, very smooth, and it works really, really well. Which is why I'm gonna put it above Soul. It has, or yeah, Soul. For some reason, I thought that I was like talking about Ragna from Blaze Blue, and then I got very confused about which Arxis game I was talking about. But no, yeah, no, it goes above Soul. I can't really have it bust into A tier though, because the chorus is a relatively prominent part of the song, and I do not want to really heavily emphasize that a song that like has a big gaping hole with something that's repeated so often. We then move on to Giovanna, who is also not great. Kind of similar to like Leo. I don't think I know we are not actually dropping back down the tier list all that heavily, but we are getting our second C tier song here, and this one's going below Leo. Um This is an interesting kind of inversion of the standard that I have when I talk about maximalism, where Geosong is very minimalist comparatively. Obviously, like in most other soundtracks, it'd also be a pretty maximalist song, but it's supposed to be like a very laid back kind of manifesto in the same way that like Soul's theme is, and therefore already on the lyrical side, it's going to be not super high up, but yeah, it's supposed to be just generally a pretty laid back song, and it's supposed to have this kind of like laid back rude dude attitude, haha, pop punk more so than like straight up like hardcore punk this time, but I don't think it works super well. This is one of the times where I think like the delivery of the song really kind of holds it back. Naoki broadly is a really good singer. I like a lot of what he does on even Nago's track, as we just talked about. I think that the way he like very ferociously comes in that chorus is great. It's just the exact content of it that's keeping Nago from an A tier. But for Geo now, he's a little bit too far back into the mix, and he's trying to sound like super laid back with the language he's not clearly super comfortable in, and it doesn't really pay off super well. Also, this is one of the more like video gamey melodies as a whole is the best way to put it. I'm not really a big fan of the guitar line or any of it, and because it's inherently trying to feel laid back, it's less driving, it's less compelling to me, and therefore I'm not getting that kind of momentous sense of happenstance that you get out of these other songs. So we're keeping it low tier. I'll play a little bit of it to try to give a justification for what I mean, but we'll move on pretty quickly from here. All right, that's enough. Even here, because I haven't actually heard this song in a while, it's jogged my memory about how much I dislike it. Like, the stop beating around the bush is just such a weird delivery to me. It takes me out of like any amount of kind of a laid back attitude I could even like try to access here. Not a big fan of it. Also, it kind of feels like another situation where they're in this mixing room and they're like, ah, shit, we're clearly deficient on some front. Let's just get them in the booth once again. And Naoki, just say like, keep it real and other like, empty statements. And then we'll just weave them in. No, you don't have to sing them. Just say it. And so that we get the keep it real stuff. And it just doesn't work. For a positive, the reason why it doesn't like drop to D tier is I do kind of like the chorus. I like specifically how it's written. The I don't be fake. Clearly is not the highest level of English fluency, but I really like it as like a turn of phrase. The I. It's the same thing as like you do you, me do me. I think that it's like really cute. Actually, is the best way to put it. And because the song isn't trying to be like this like super anthemic thing, it gets away with those kind of like playful like turns of phrase in English. So props to them on that front. Everything else about the song is just not up to snuff for me. Even like the intro like drags on like probably like one like bar too long is the best way to put it. Like I don't know, the guitar riff is just very insipid to me. Unfortunately, it is near the bottom of the list. The thing is like it's still more listenable than a lot of stuff that I get on game soundtracks, but no, I just would not actively listen to Geo's theme personally. All right, we're moving on to Mr. Anji Mito. This is a song that I actually had pretty close to like Geo. I also wasn't a big fan of like what I was doing like sonically, and I didn't think it was paying off. But the more I listened to it, the more I enjoyed it, and it's kind of a song like Rams where I start backwards from its payoff, and then I get a bit more of an understanding where it's coming from. Because man, does this song have like the best fucking bridge in the entire series? Yeah, there's some grievances that I have with the delivery of the verses, and I'm also not the biggest fan of the unadorned chorus without the bridge. Um, and that's what really keeps it out of like S tier or the super, super high parts of A tier. But it's still going above May and it's going below Milia in A tier itself. So what I want to do is we are going to jump forward to the bridge, listen to that, and then if I have something to say about like the chorus, I'll jump back to it. But I'm addicted to the bridge, and we are going to force ourselves to listen to it.
The music that's a finish never ending in my head. Promise I made to you, promise I made to you. Now a single hook step carries to my heart. I'm still chasing one. I'm still chasing.
Oh man, oh I love everything about that bridge. I get so much joy out of it. You know, as far as many times as I've heard it. Props to the sound design for one. The buzzy, almost kind of like sitar like synth blasts that you get. These like very shimmery, sparkly, but not like perfectly clean notes that come out above everything else, especially as we like enter into the bridge proper, is so good. I like the little like allusions to traditional like Japanese, like recital techniques with this like yo pull up. Kind of reminds me of like yobadashis or something similar to that. Really, really well done. And then the actual lyrics also are just great at that point in time. Frankly, I think the kind of painting of a picture throughout most of the track is pretty like standard stuff, but because it's so quaint and because it's so different from how a lot of the other songs try to convey itself, I think it works really, really well. Um, but I really like a lot of the bridge specifically. Where is it in the listing of the notes here? The music that's finished never ends in my head. The promise I made to you. Now a single footstep carries two hearts. That's a great turn of phrase. That shit slaps, man. That shit just slaps right in the like heartstrings. Ugh, pluck 'em, pluck 'em, pluck 'em with a plectrum. It's so good. I love it. It's I think gonna immediately allude back to the opening, the countless footsteps and two small ones I haven't forgotten. I really like it. It's just super fulfilling, and I know I'm focusing like on like one segment of the song a lot, but it truly is what hard carries it, and it kind of makes everything around it better to a degree, right? It's kind of like Patton Oswalt. Uh, yeah, it's fantastic. Huge fan of it. But to be honest, when I'm hearing the rest of the track, I'm mostly looking forward to the bridge. That being said, it isn't like the rest of it is terrible or anything. It's certainly like a B grade song with like an S plus plus grade bridge, and therefore it averages out pretty nicely at high A tier, in my opinion. We're moving over to a track that I also think is chronically underappreciated. This was my number one for a long time. Um, and it dropped below Kai for a little bit, but Eno's theme Requiem has jumped right back up to the number one spot for me. The more that I think about and really heavily deliberate between my top tier, um, this song is, I'm not going to say perfect, but it is the most fulfilling song that I've heard from a video game soundtrack in a long time. And there's just so many things about it that work. I'm going to go to the chorus, but we are going to talk about the verses. We are going to talk about the fact that out of all the songs here, it has probably the most resonant lyrics. There really is no space being bought up by things that shouldn't be there. There's maybe one segment where that's not the case, but man, it is good. We will also talk about the fact that it's an excessively long guitar solo, but let's go with the last. And so we get to a song that not only is really sonically fulfilling, but one that has basically perfect lyrics throughout that really, I'm not even gonna say makes you think, but it once again catches you off guard because this is a non-native English speaker dropping like really poetic turns of phrases that I think are kind of unrestricted by the norms that we set out in regards to like what we would think that we're gonna hear from English, right? First, the metaphor to open up the chorus that we are falling down slowly like snow led by gravity. Um, I think it works because of how definitively it is stated. Um, Clearly, it is a vaguely emo rendition of the fact that we are pulled inexorably towards a demise. Um, but the fact that it is said in such kind of a warming way is, I think, really kind of making up for the fact that it is broadly a one-dimensional statement, right? For me, it works. I could see why it wouldn't work for some others, but the fact it's then followed up by just some more really, really smart phrases, I think works fantastically. Um, the idea of like fading away in the warm glow kind of ties back to what I was saying in regards to it being a very kind of like warming rendition of Oblivion. And while up until that point it ends with without resisting, um, we see it turned to if I am swallowed by fate, I must have fought well, which shows no, in fact, it is a matter of fighting hard to find a space in this world, no matter how you feel. Um, Leads to this chorus at the very end pulling double duty as not only the kind of like turn of phrase and payoff that we see out of the very best from like Ramlethal's song, but also beyond that, it's just really just it's so good. I don't know what else to say, man. It's so good. Um Beyond that, it also kind of does the same kind of picture painting thing that really only Anji's theme does in its lyrics at the beginning. Especially the second verse, the "Let's go take some strawberries and go to the hill if you want to see the fireworks breeding cute starf." Um, the thing is, instead of just kind of being a trip down memory lane, the fact that it then kind of slams back against this idea that these memories are even real or that this is part of Eno and it's still representative of who Eno is hits really nicely. And it creates a framework that just doesn't really exist elsewhere in the franchise. And that's one of the reasons why I think it works so well. It's just generally a pretty stunning demonstration of empathy. I think that Daisuke's rendition of like what it feels like to be in the state of like anhedonia is really, really impressive. There's two grievances I have with the song. One of them is like a personal hang up. I talked about how like most of the lyricism is like pretty tight. The one example for me that is against that is the "I was on a roll, I had to stop." Um, for one, I just always think about it like a Subway sandwich roll, so I just think of like a Wawa hoagie, whatever they say. I was on a roll, and then I just like think of like a picture of like photoshopped in front of like a BLT. But that's just me. That's just me ruining the song for myself. The other thing is just like I think that like that part's like a little bit of space filling in terms of the lyrics because then it's right after that you follow with a whammy of there is no up or down above the clouds and I can't breathe, which oh is so good. And right before that you had the I had flew so high that I could see everything, which really just kind of oh man, I just see that as like a parallel to like this like broad sensation that like a lot of folks with depression have that like they are rationally like or they're like rationally justified in their feelings about the world because they have seen what has been offered and they see the philosophy behind the actions of people around them and they see that it's all meaningless, right? I think that's such so good. The I was on a roll about like, oh yeah, I'm really flying high with these clouds. It's just kind of silly, and I do think that that is the one place where the lyrics do fail the song a little bit. Beyond that, it also has that extensive guitar solo, which while better than the others because I think it's like a little bit more tied into its beat and whatnot, it's still overall pretty excessive. I don't know. You're left digesting the choruses prior to it enough to where I think I'm not super bored by the guitar solo, but it is really long and it's also a huge segment of the song relative to everything else that comes before and after. So that is something to note going in. It's the reason why, it occasionally would like oscillate and trade places with Kai's theme. But today, today, I don't know, name it as you will. It's going to be sitting a little bit higher for myself here at the number one spot. And with that, we complete the first part of the Guilty Gear Strive with Bedman Tier List Maker's song ranking system that I have devised for myself. We have a bunch of DLC characters coming out in the future that we will use to fill in this chart, but for here and now on this first edition, I think that it's time to end. It is now 1.5 hours later. Basically, it's 3:30 now, and I really hope that people enjoyed doing this as much as I enjoyed doing it. I know that clearly this kind of unscripted rambling is probably not optimal for, actually compelling content, but I just kind of want to get all my thoughts out there and do it in a relatively structured manner. I thought that doing it around a tier list made a lot of sense, and we'll continue to fill it out, like I said, in the future. So, as for now, thank you everybody for watching. If you want to see me, I am doing League of Legends play-by-play shoutcasting basically every single night. You can follow me on my Twitter at NyarkoLOL. But beyond that, I try to keep a low profile, as it were. And I'll be around for the next edition of what you're probably here for, which is more Guilty Gear talk. Relatively soon, maybe I'll get back into my multi-modern breakdowns as well. But alas, I'm a busy person. I got a lot of stuff to talk about and do, and I'm pulled in multiple directions. If this is not indicated that enough, so yeah, that's it for me tonight. Have a good one.